Hello and welcome to the webinar. Hopefully everyone can hear. If you can't hear what we're saying, just have a quick check at your computer audio and pop us a message in the chat box at the bottom just to let us know everything's all fine with you. So good morning and welcome to today's webinar. For those of you who don't know me, I am Marie Cheng and I'm the Partnerships Manager here at My HR Toolkit. I'd like to welcome you all to today's webinar. So for those of you who've joined us in the past, you'll notice that we've done quite a lot of different webinars since the beginning of lockdown, which seems quite a while ago, but we've obviously done a variety of different topics from furlough to specific business topics, which have all been really popular. In the new year, we've just started a series of webinars aimed at the SME and HR professional, and today we are going to be looking at why social media is an HR professional's best friend. And I am joined by our resident social media guru, Hannah, who will come on in a second, who will be hosting this. And what she'll be doing is going through some tips and tricks around why social media is really important, how to use that for about 25-30 minutes of the webinar. And then we'll have a section at the end to ask any questions. We would encourage you that if you do have any questions, just to pop them along on the question box. So if you have a look on your bottom of your screen, there should be a little hover kind of toolbar which will have a question and answers box, and if we could ask you to put your questions and answers in there. You'll also see a chat box if you've got any other queries or just want to participate in whatever Hannah's going through on her presentation, so feel free to put some messages into that. A bit of other housekeeping, obviously, just to clarify that today's session is around general advice and tips and tricks and best practice, and also just to highlight the fact that our next webinar, which is going to be on quick SEO wins for your HR consultancy, what I'll do is I'll stick a link to the registration page for that webinar in the chat as we're going through the webinar, so that you can get signed up for that. So in terms of intros, as I say, I'll let Hannah do a much more detailed introduction to herself, but as I said, she's obviously just joined the team a few months ago, so I'll pass over to Hannah.
Yes, good morning everyone. Thanks for joining me today. So I'll quickly introduce myself before cracking on. So I'm Hannah. As Marie said, I'm a new member of the team. I started late November at My HR Toolkit. And before that, I recently graduated Sheffield Hallam, finishing a business and marketing degree in April, which feels like a mountain away. And during my time studying marketing at Sheffield Hallam, I was a social media manager of a cafe called Urban Deli, just off West Street in Sheffield, if anyone knows it. And also Walkabout in Sheffield too during my degree, which is a great cracking night out in Sheffield. And since graduating, I joined a social media consultancy company in Doncaster called Be More Social. And in that role, I essentially coached, educated and trained small, medium business owners and the employees of small, medium business owners social media strategy to apply to their business. And since I've joined My HR Toolkit as social media and digital marketing executive, and today I'm going to go through why social media is HR professional's best friend. So all the tips and tricks today. So quickly run through what I'll go over. So to start with, I'm going to go through an introduction to social media within the workplace, how to use social media for recruitment purposes, and this will touch on both finding a candidate actively as well as reviewing a candidate in the interview process. And I'll also go through how to use social media to increase morale and communication, especially virtually during this time. And finally, how to keep informed using social media. So to start with, social media is a massive part of our society now. Over the past decade, it's intertwined with what we do and how we communicate with each other, and it is a big thing that businesses and people are massively active in. And since the first lockdown, social media use actually increased by 40% if it wasn't being used enough. So it's massively important, like I said, to use social media proactively within this time, personally and professionally, to keep in touch with everyone. And I'm just going to quickly run through some stats on the social media platforms. I call them the big four, which is Facebook, Instagram, Twitter and LinkedIn. So please do in the chat box as well, just comment what social media platform's your favourite. I think mine's probably Instagram, just because it's just mindless scrolling, if I'm honest. Twitter, a bit of a Marmite platform, to be honest. You either love it or you hate it. But without further ado, whilst you're putting them in the chat, I'll go through each individual platform and some facts on it. So Facebook to start with. Facebook is most used for personal and leisure purposes. So if you've got a personal Facebook account, you're more common to use it for your own purposes. And 74% of users are aged between 18 and 44 on Facebook. The average user spends 38 minutes a day on the platform. So it's a massive amount of time to be spending on it. And one really key feature of Facebook and why it draws in a lot of people and a lot of people stay on it is because of its community feel, and it's got a lot of groups actively within the Facebook platform that you can stay connected with. And during this time, it is really fantastic. Moving on to Instagram. So Instagram is again most used personally for leisure purposes. 64% of users are aged between 16 and 34, so it's quite a young demographic of customers on this platform. And the average user spends 28 minutes a day. Again, it's a lot. I'm probably guilty of that myself. And it's a very visual and highly used for personal interests. So a lot of hobbies and a lot of pursuits of what you're into outside of work, as well as personally, is used on Instagram. And Twitter is a Marmite platform, but it's used both personally, predominantly personally, but also professionally too. And 64% of those users are aged between 18 and 49, so it's a really wide demographic of customers. And the average user spends about 3.5 minutes on Twitter per session. So it's really quick, you get a lot of information in that time, and then you go off to the next thing. And it is very fast paced, it's insightful, and it's a conversation led platform, as you may have seen using it yourself. And LinkedIn. So LinkedIn is a big sort of fish in the game, especially with what we're going to go through today. But this is most used for professional purposes, as you will be aware. And 61% of those users are aged between 25 and 34. So it's actually a younger demographic than some may think. And the average user spends only 17 minutes a month on the platform. And that is really rapidly increasing as it's getting more popular generally. And the content on LinkedIn is driven by B2B networking, employee driven. You may see a lot of like staff anniversaries, and it's also network content essentially. It's a great platform to grow your business and get connected with people alike. And social media within the workplace. So social media is used for personal and professional purposes, but is commonly getting placed within the workplace now, and it's vital for businesses to grow, especially in this pandemic that it is. So it's a great method of advertising your business completely free to a wide audience. There's really unlimited opportunities with it, and it's a great way to engage with your community, whether that's clients, customers, employees, anyone that you're connected with. It's a great way just to keep in touch with a lot of people in one place, especially professionally. And there is also a stigma of using social media within the workplace that needs to be addressed a little bit and monitored if you are wanting to implement it within your workplace too. But it has so many benefits for different job functions. Obviously today we're going to be looking at HR purposes, but to start with sales, it's a great way to find leads and prospects. Creative people, a creative department, it's a great way like Instagram and Pinterest to find inspiration. It helps with your idea generation too. And marketing, obviously I'm guilty for, is finding leads and creating, sustaining brand awareness. For management purposes, you can view competitor information and activity, which you couldn't really do previously. You can see how they're growing, you can see how they're adapting to this pandemic. It's really insightful for looking for competitor information. And it's also for management networking opportunities, how you can grow your business and also reach out to people of interest. And human resources, finally, is what I'm going to go through for the next slides. We're going to be looking at recruitment purposes, maintaining culture, communicating and keeping informed with what's going on. So we'll start with recruitment, and I'm going to go through some steps within this individual process and throughout this presentation. So please do get LinkedIn or all the social platforms up that we'll go through up on your screen or your monitor, and feel free to go through these steps if it's something you've not seen or heard of before. And also, as always, if you do have any questions whilst I'm going through the steps and practicing it, just put it in the Q&A section and we'll address them at the end of the presentation. So recruitment. It can be a bit of a tedious task, and I'm sure as a HR manager you might be sifting through a lot of CVs that aren't of interest to you, or is not necessarily addressing the spec that you're wanting for a candidate. So what I really recommend people to do if you're on a budget, if you're just not finding the candidates that you wish you could find, is to take a more proactive approach by using LinkedIn, which I'll go on to. You can as well, that I've not really touched on, post within groups. Facebook's got a lot of active HR seekers or specific job groups on LinkedIn. There'll be loads of HR professionals trying to actually look for different work. So you can post within them, but do be aware if you do post in them, you might get a massive influx of CVs that you have to dig through and sieve through. But to use it proactively, LinkedIn is the place for it. So to save money, find high quality candidates proactively, what I recommend doing is these 4 steps. So to start with, go onto LinkedIn, and in the search bar section, you'll see at the top of your desktop or computer, just type in a job function. I've just done social media marketing because it came to mind. And what you'll be able to see, and some people aren't really aware of it, is these little circular tabs that come up after any search you do on the LinkedIn platform. So we've got here jobs, courses, people, groups, companies, it goes on. You can filter it more so. So for this purpose, click people. So you clicked people, a second step, social media marketing people. It will then come up green, you've touched on that. And then on the right of it, it will come up with a lot of filter options that you can sort of filter through and get the right candidate that you want. So in these filter options, you can see connections, locations, company they're currently at. But what I recommend doing is just pressing all filters, and you can see definitely all that information. So if you're advertising a job and the actual role is physically based, it's not virtual like lockdown can provide, and it's based in Sheffield, you can filter the location, might be Sheffield, Barnsley, Doncaster, so on. You can filter if you want that candidate to have a degree, what certain degree you want them to have. You can filter the connections. So if they're a first connection, it means that you are already connected with them or directly connected with them. A second connection refers to if your connections are connected with that person. And a third connection means none of your connections or yourself is connected with that person. It's a third party person. So it'd be really great to find those people too. And then when you put in that information, it will give you a really filtered search for that candidate that you're looking for. And it will give you a load of profiles that you can sit down, sift through. And it's really just a proactive way of finding the candidate right. You can go onto a candidate's profile, do be notified they will get a notification, and you can look at their experience, you can look at what skills they've got, you can look and see if they're a right candidate for you. And if they are, what you'll be able to see is right next to the connect button, your third and final step, you'll connect a message section that you can use if you connect with them, and then this more section here. So if you and your colleague are trying to find the right candidate proactively using this, you can share this profile in a message. So you can communicate with each other and say, oh, Sally, what do you think of this person? Yeah, let's get an interview with them. So that's a great way of keeping on track of the people that you are viewing. And you can also save their profile as a PDF. And what LinkedIn will provide is a PDF version of their profile. It will include their name, if any contact information they've uploaded, experience and details about sort of them as an asset, so previous job experience, and if they've got any endorsed skills, so on and so forth, and 1 to 2 PDF pages. So you can save it to your computer if you maybe want to put it in your back pocket for a rainy day, or you think they'll be of interest in a certain time or climate. And it's really great, sort of a time saver there. And a top tip that I recommend for people to look for when you are sifting through these candidates is look for this banner, which is open to work. It's something that LinkedIn promotes people using if they are open to work or changing roles. So this little banner is something that someone manually updates on their profile, and it's quite sneaky, because if I had this, it's just an example, but if I had this on my profile, no one else from my company could see that I've got that, so it's not going to hurt anyone's feeling, but it goes out to your third and second sort of connections on LinkedIn. So if you are looking for someone from those connections, you'll be able to see that they are interested in changing roles or open to any external work. And one other great thing as well is LinkedIn has the active hashtag open to work. So again, just that step one, when you're typing in that certain role, instead just type in hashtag open to work, and it will come up with a sort of feed with that hashtag. I believe there's 19 million people following it. So that's a lot of people for that content to go out to. So if you are going to post in that, it's really active, really great way to get clients, candidates even, but just be very specific and say what location, what salary, what specifically is involved with this candidate. It's a great way for people to see that post and then share it with someone they know is looking for a similar role, or for them themselves to apply to it. So that's a great way of finding a candidate. I'm going to move on to now the recruitment of actually reviewing a candidate. And social media is something that people definitely use in order to filter out candidates and also get a feel for what they're a bit like. So social media, again, it's a great way to get an initial impression of someone. So I don't want you to take this, and no one should take it as that is what they're like as a person. It is obviously how we want to get perceived as. But there's two different sections of trying to find and review a candidate once you've met them initially, or once they've actually applied for this job. So one way is looking through their personal accounts. So like we touched on at the start, Facebook, Twitter and Instagram are platforms that are used for personal interests. So what I recommend doing is looking through their profiles and just see how they will fit in terms of culture. So this won't be anything to reflect on them professionally, but it's nice to know. You might see on someone's Instagram that they go running, and you know that your company's got a running club. So it's nice to get a bit of an impression of how they will fit in with the rest of the team too. And don't scroll too back. I'm sure that you'll be able to find some dirt if you look for it, but try to judge of what they're like currently. I'm sure if someone went to my Twitter as a moany teenager, they probably wouldn't be impressed. So do take it with a pinch of salt, definitely. And obviously with that in mind, you've got your personal side of that person, how they might fit in with the culture, but obviously what we wanted to know if they can do the job right, and if what they've said on their CV or said in the interview sort of correlates. So what we want to look at is their professional profile. So what we're going to do for that is looking at their LinkedIn. So reviewing a candidate on their LinkedIn, we're going to review these 5 steps. So whilst I'm going through these 5 steps, absolutely feel free to go on someone's profile. You can either go on mine, my name's Hannah Wheater, and have a cheeky stalk, that's fine. But what you want to look at is these 5 aspects and just see how it correlates with their CV or what other impressions they've given you so far, or what they've said in an interview even too. So the first one is your activity. So once you've gone onto someone's profile, you'll see some basic information. And then one of the first options it will give you is the activity section. You just click on activity. You can obviously see initially these few things that they've most recently engaged with. So this would be either commenting, liking, sharing, all this information will be there. And then you can also press your see all activity to see how they've been interacting in the past months. It might be, they might have been speaking to clients, they might have been tagged in something and replied to it. You can just get how they are sort of acting professionally on the platform. People are active and some people aren't as active on LinkedIn, so do bear that in mind, but it's a really great way to get how they perceive themselves professionally. And the second section is to look at their experience. So look and see how their experience matches up to what they've put on their CV or said to you previously in an interview. It's really great and really key to understand that a lot of people sometimes don't put all of their experiences on the CV that they send you, or say all the things they want to hear in the interview, just because there's a lot of other jobs, like, I don't know, you might be like a customer service provider at Sainsbury's, and you might not want to promote that significantly on your CV. So there'll be a lot of information on the experience section on someone's LinkedIn profile, so you can find out more information on other roles that they might have been involved in, and they might have some key aspects within those roles that have not promoted as much, that you think, oh, we could actually make some room for this here, or I didn't really know about that, I didn't really get a chance to touch on this skill in our interview previously. So that's a great way to just see how it correlates, see if the dates match up to on the LinkedIn platform there. And the third section is your skills and endorsements. So some people really use this activity and some people don't. Do bear that in mind. It's a great way to see how people are credible within their field or their job title that they're describing. So if you scroll down past activity, past experience, we've got the skills and endorsements section. So skills are things that you can add to your profile, can have unlimited listed on there. Most people have about 10 to 15. And you can sort of credit yourself for different skills. So I've got social media marketing, digital marketing, customer service, so on and so forth. The people that are connected with you or know and credit you for that skill are likely to go on, credit and endorse that skill on your profile. So it helps people understand, like future employees, how credible they are in that field, who has actually endorsed that skill. So for example, my old boss has endorsed that role there, a skill even. So it's really sort of interesting to see how credible they are and how sort of sufficient they are at that skill. And also, like we said with the experience section, and they might have some skills listed that you didn't actually know about, or if you've not had the interview with them or you're having another interview with them, you could bring up that skill and say, oh, do you have any experience in this skill? If so, what? And that might be of interest to your company too. So it's really great to take a note of those skills. And fourth, we've got the recommendation section just below skills and endorsements. And these are written testimonials essentially for that person. It will say on the sort of left-hand side of the screen that person's information, when they did that recommendation, and it will say what relationship they have with that person. So for example, we've got Paul Robinson, a lovely client of mine, and it says here Paul was a client of Hannah's. And in this sort of section, it will say how that person has found the experience working with them, or knowing them, or getting advice from that person previously. And it's a really credible source, and you can pull out information from here that you know it can be interesting to see their experiences, and it's also just great to sort of see how people sort of come across to others. And fifth and finally, what you see on people's profiles when reviewing this candidate is their interests. So this will just have a bit of a breakdown of what pages they follow. It might be actual people they follow here. So you can get to see and get to know how they might be professionally within their interests. So you might be following like photography pages or something they might be doing outside of work that overlaps between professional but personal too. So that's a really great way to have a look at it. But always remember, like I mentioned previously, LinkedIn will always notify that person if you viewed their profile. So if you are in the recruitment stage, just do be aware that they're going to get a notification saying Hannah Weiser has just viewed your profile, which will obviously be interesting to them, and they might sweat under the collar a little bit of making sure everything's up to date. So yes, that is how I recommend reviewing and recruiting a candidate. I'm going to move on to culture and communication, how to use that as for HR functions, especially during this time. So social media is something that has come across massively and been used more productively during the first lockdown and since the first lockdown. And it's definitely affected the way that people's cultures come across, and also the activities that people have actually done during lockdown too. So social media can be a great way to lift employees' morale, and in the business and promote company culture visually, also virtually. So here are some ways to increase your employees or colleagues' morale through social media. So the first one is a kudos, which some people are aware of and some people aren't. It's a feature just on LinkedIn, and it allows you to highlight some of their work that they've done previously. So they might have finished a project, or they might be up to something that you want to promote on social media. So this can be done from your personal LinkedIn account. And simply how you do that, feel free to do it with my account if you want, or someone else's account you see on your LinkedIn. Just go to someone's account. In that more section, when you are connected with them, the second option will say give kudos. So that'll be where the connection is, message option, that more section, and then just second down. And you can choose from a range of kudoses to provide that person. And it just highlights and just increases morale and gets a tap on the back of what someone's been up to. And like we touched on with the recruitment option, you can credit someone's skills and endorsements that they've got on there. They might have done some really great training, or they've finished a really large project and you want to give them maybe time management skills. You can credit that on their profile. Again, good tap on the back. And third, we've got the recommendation sections too. So give them a recommendation, briefly highlight what they've been doing. It gives them a notification when you do endorse a skill or provide a recommendation. So that person will be notified. And again, it's just a great way to boost endorphins just a little bit in this time. And fourth and finally, we've got actually promoting what the company's doing in terms of the culture throughout all social media platforms. So this can just be like a shout out is commonly used, like the hashtag shout out. And you can just highlight maybe the progress that people are doing. You can just highlight what you're actually doing within lockdown too. And just making sure that people are credited for their work virtually, if anything, during this time. And during sort of sustaining, increasing morale is the key to it, but we can also use it to promote company culture too. And this is what I'll go on to. So morale is obviously a key aspect, especially this time. You can't just go to the pub and have a pint if someone's finished a massive project or you've just got a new customer over the line, or you can't really celebrate someone's achievements physically. So do make sure you are increasing them virtually where possible using social media. And once you have done that, just promote them throughout all your social media channels if you can. So I've done some examples here. So it could be their staff work anniversary, promote that, how many years of service or months of service they have been at the company. You can promote the team building activities that you've been doing. Try and highlight some personality of the business. If there's a funny in-joke or something hilarious that happened during the call, feel free to sort of promote it and get across that culture and personality. Also got staff training and development. If anyone is doing anything externally, internally with the business, how can you promote that? How can you get across that you are still developing professionally, individually, as well as a company? You can look at the promote business progress. So though it does overlap with culture a bit, it does display to everyone that you're growing, and it gives them sort of some initiative to get involved in that and credit your business. And you can also highlight what your staff are doing outside of work. So how are you promoting that culture for people during this hard time for everyone, and sort of moving forward too. So this could be hobbies or interests, or people just going the extra mile. Oh, there we go. And in terms of morale, social media is just a fantastic way to sustain morale, as well as keeping communication with employees or colleagues at your company. So COVID-19 has definitely taken an impact of our social interactions, the way that we interact, and especially within employees, it's a weird thing to adapt to in this time. And some companies are encouraging informal conversations internally, but sometimes you just don't really have the time for it. Something can crop up, and that personal conversation might be sort of set aside for another day, and you don't really get a chance to catch up properly. So social media allows colleagues to have that sort of overlap of personal and professional lives, do feel free to just follow colleagues that you're still in contact with on social media platforms, and just see what they're up to, see what's making them tick. It might reflect how they're coping, or even some innovative ways of what they're doing. And it's just really interesting to see what everyone's up to, and where appropriate. Obviously, you might not follow everyone or get in contact with everyone from your business, but you can still have a conversation alongside work, outside work hours, using social media platforms. So just make sure you're following them, commenting, liking the posts that they're putting out or conversations they're making. And you can always bring it up in calls. It's a good conversation starter, and just say, oh, so you did this at the weekend, how was that? It can lead on to a conversation from there. And then I'm going to move on to keeping informed. So there's methods that you can use to keep informed using social media. And it is, like anything at this time, really fantastic to get all your information in one place, instead of sort of faffing about with all these different guidelines and suggestions that people are throwing at you in this time. So there are many ways to keep update, and for HR functions it will be employment law or ways to engage employees remotely, but use social media to stay update. I recommend joining HR community groups. Community groups are mostly based on LinkedIn and Facebook. You're going to find, like we touched on, Facebook more personal HR groups, so it might be sort of, I've seen like a HR quote group, so that might be like a good way to keep motivated. And there's also sort of LinkedIn HR groups that may focus more on facts or updates in employment law, and you get to see a conversation of everyone in the same boat, and you get to see what everyone's up to. Also follow credible pages, so like CIPD is an example, but there are loads and loads of pages to follow. It can just be general news ones, or it can be a specific individual, maybe someone that's got a personal brand within HR that's really taking a lead on any changes within government guidelines, or any information you think could be useful to you and your business and the employees within it. And I also recommend just following some hashtags. This can be on LinkedIn, as well as externally too on personal platforms. So with LinkedIn, there's loads of professional hashtags, so employee wellbeing, employee training. It's getting a lot of attention right now, and there's a lot of innovative methods of keeping employees engaged during this time. So just do follow them and just keep up to date. And when you are scrolling through, it can just be an easy and quick way to sort of consume that information and to keep informed. So what we covered today is sort of the wrapping up the presentation is an introduction to social media within the workplace, how social media can benefit for recruitment purposes, and how to use social media to increase morale and to communicate effectively with employees, and how to use social media to keep informed generally. So in that case, does anybody have any questions? And I will pass over to Marie. So please do pick my mind for absolutely anything that I can help with this topic.
Great, thank you, Hannah. Yeah, so as I said, obviously, if you've got any questions at the moment, I know that you're all probably just listening through to Hannah's presentation, but if you had anything specific that you wanted to ask her, either in relation to like your own social media or like social media around your business, obviously, as Hannah was saying, like, you know, right now it's quite an interesting time to try and look for alternative means as to how to get your business out there. So don't know whether anyone had any pressing questions. And whilst I'll wait a little bit, we will, just as a reminder, obviously if people had to drop off or people came in late to the presentation, we are recording this, and we will send this out with a follow-up shortly. So okay, I'll give it a couple more minutes. Hannah, I guess as a question for you, perhaps you could also give a bit of a ideas to like what types of things you might have been doing. Like, for instance, obviously you've just come on to Toolkit, some of the things that you found really helpful to do to help promote what we're doing.
Yeah, I think there's multiple ways to keep promoted with social media, keep your businesses promoted. I think as HR and business development is going to be most of your activities on LinkedIn. I think it's great to use LinkedIn to sort of outreach to different people and connect with them, especially if you're a business to business company. So I'd recommend maybe getting involved in more groups, posting within them, highlighting within those groups what you might be interested in or what your company is currently up to. So for an example, there's a lot of UK SME companies. So if your business is an SME, feel free to just join those groups, get involved in the conversations that people are talking about in those groups, as well as promoting your own business and sharing a post to gain attention and traction to your own platform.
Cool. Looks like I think you've probably answered quite a lot of people's questions. I imagine as people are going along, they'll probably potentially have bits that come to mind. So I obviously recommend connecting with Hannah. If you haven't connected with Hannah on LinkedIn, you can drop her a message or drop her a post on her feed just to ask her anything. If no one has any other questions, what we will do is, if Hannah, I can get you to shift to the next slide just as a reminder. So as I said, we are starting to do a lot more around these, which are probably things that you might want to think about with your own businesses. So the next one that we're doing, Camille's doing, is on quick SEO wins. I don't know how many of you are currently maximizing your SEO, but she's going to do one on quick SEO wins for your HR consultancy, which will be on Wednesday. It's just a reminder, we've changed the day to Wednesday, so the next one's on Wednesday 17th of February at 10 AM. I've put a link to the registration page on the chat, but as I said, obviously we will send a recording of the webinar and include how you can get signed up for that there. But if there are no other questions, I'll just check. I will probably end the webinar there. So thank you again to Hannah and her expertise. We might down the line have a few more other bits around social media that we'll do and post up to you guys. But as I said, yeah, just a reminder that the next webinar in a couple of weeks, and we will be in touch with a follow-up email with the recording. But thank you very much for joining. Hope that you all have a good weekend when it comes to it. And yeah, we will leave it there. Thank you.